Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into the tragic events of March 12th, 2005 at a Living Church of God congregation in Brookfield, Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's a heavy one. We've got a pretty substantial amount of material here that dives into this horrific incident. I think the mission here is to sort through all of this and try to get a clearer picture of what exactly took place on that day.
Absolutely. And, looking at the facts first and foremost, March 12th, 2005, Brookfield, Wisconsin, the Living Church of God, a congregation gathered there, sadly became the victims of a horrific attack.
Yeah, the weapon used in the attack was a 9mm Beretta 92 FS handgun,
Yeah.
and tragically resulted in 8 deaths, including the perpetrator and 4 injuries.
And the perpetrator in this case being Terry Ratzmann.
That's right.
Now, Ratzmann had a connection to the church, right?
He did. The sources indicate that he was a former member of the Living Church of God, and the reported motive appears to be anti-Christian sentiment, basically making this a religious hate crime.
That's a difficult thing to grapple with. I mean, what more can we glean from the materials about Ratzmann's background?
Well, according to the sources, he lived with his mother and his sister, and in terms of his health, he suffered from Hashimoto's thyroiditis and a bicuspid aortic valve. And it's also noted that he was missing part of 3 fingers on his left hand due to a previous injury.
Gotcha. And what about his professional life at the time of the shooting? What did he do?
Right. So he worked as a computer technician for a placement firm, and his contract was coming to an end right as this happened.
Okay. And what did the sources tell us about his mental state leading up to the shooting?
Yeah. So the report suggests that he suffered from bouts of depression. And another detail that sort of jumps out from the source material is that he was reportedly infuriated by a sermon the minister had given just 2 weeks before the attack.
Okay. Now, that reported trigger, that sermon, that's something to really keep in mind as we move forward here. So let's turn to the incident itself. Where did the shooting actually take place?
It happened at a Sheraton Hotel building in Brookfield.
Okay. So not a traditional church building.
Right.
Can you walk us through the sequence of events as it unfolded?
Sure. From what we gather from the materials, Ratzmann initially left the gathering, then returned about 20 minutes later. And when he came back, he had the 9mm Beretta handgun, and he fired 22 rounds into the congregation.
It's just awful. And who were the victims that lost their lives in the shooting?
Well, most tragically, the minister, Pastor Randy Gregory, was killed, and so was his 16-year-old son, James Gregory. The other victims were Harold Dykmeyer, Gloria Cretari, Bart Oliver, Richard Reeves, and Gerald Miller. It's important to say their names, These were real people.
Of course, yeah. And in addition to those who were killed, 4 others were injured, including Pastor Gregory's wife.
That's right.
So it seems Ratzmann ended his own life there at the scene. Is that correct?
Yes. He died by suicide midway through his second magazine. He actually had 3 magazines with him.
Oh, wow. That's a lot to unpack there. Obviously, an event like this would have triggered a huge response from law enforcement. Can you talk a bit about the immediate aftermath and the investigation that followed?
Yeah, so right after the shooting, police searched the home that Ratzmann shared with his mother and sister, and they found a .22 rifle, ammunition, and 3 computers.
I see. And what was the initial focus of the investigation? Where did they begin?
Well, it seems like they started by looking into the teachings and the history of the Worldwide Church of God, the church founded by Herbert W. Armstrong, and also the leadership of Roderick C. Meredith, who was the head of the Living Church of God at the time.
So they were exploring potential links to the doctrine or even the leadership of these churches.
Yeah, it seems like it. They were trying to figure out if those things played any role in Ratzmann's motive.
And did that investigative angle shift at all as things progressed?
Yeah, it did. As the investigation moved forward, they ended up focusing more on the religious aspect as being the main motive for the shooting. And there was also some information that suggested that the pastor's family might have been a specific target.
Okay, so a targeted attack on a specific family within the church.
Yeah, that's what some of the information seems to suggest.
How has this event been classified in a wider context, like with other similar incidents?
Well, Voice of America actually categorized this as one of 5 house of worship shootings in the U.S. that were motivated by religious hatred.
So unfortunately not an isolated incident in that sense.
Yeah. And tragically, it's also listed under, the list of homicides in Wisconsin and the list of rampage killers in the United States.
Wow. So to kind of summarize what we've learned here, we've been looking at this just terrible, terrible mass shooting. March 12, 2005, Terry Ratzmann, a former member of the Living Church of God, carried out this really awful attack on the congregation while they were gathered at a hotel in Brookfield, Wisconsin.
Right. It resulted in 8 people being killed, 4 injured,
Yeah.
and Ratzmann, who we know struggled with depression and was possibly provoked by that sermon, ultimately took his own life at the scene.
And based on what we can tell from the investigation, it seems like anti-Christian sentiment was the driving force behind this tragedy. As we step back from all of this, it really leaves us with a lot to think about, doesn't it? How can we even begin to understand what leads a person to commit such a violent act?
It's really tough. You've got someone's personal history, their mental health, any religious beliefs or grievances they might hold. All these things are intertwined. Trying to untangle that and understand how it culminates in something so horrible is a huge challenge.
It is. It really makes you think about the lasting impact of something like this, not only on the community directly affected, but also on the broader conversation we have about hate, violence, and how we make sense of it all.
It does.
It's a lot to process, and I think that's where we'll leave it for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.